Then there's another thing, like if we talk about this about never forget. You know they say like an elephant never forget, a horse never forget, right? I think it's I think it's the same in a way. Small animals or big animals, and you also have the perception that you say that the wildlife that all the people that say that animals cannot really think. Depending on what they know, because I think wildlife to to survive in the wildlife, you have to be a good thinker, even better than if you're fed every day, right? So basically, I made some friendship with wild animals. There's of course sometimes feeding involved, but sometimes not. I had a friend that was a hawk, and I became friends with the mother hawk, and then I became friends with the baby hawk. And they followed us around, and they always looked out for. They can see a lot when they're flying. I also had crows. There was in another place there was a hawk type that push out the eggs and baby birds from a nest and lay their own eggs, and it's called a gull. It's a it's a predator bird, right? And that little predator bird had disturbed a crow's nesting, and because it kicked out the almost grown-up babies, then they kept falling out the nesting, and the hawk were chasing the adults. That meaning, while it's chasing the adults, what happened is that the birds that been pulled out of the nesting, they starved. So me and the dogs decided to give the one crow a home for some time and resting. So he had egg feeding and water and slept. He slept all the time. And then out again. So we had him for a week or something. And then he was set free. They still remember. Then I had like a small place. There was a lot of car coming by, and there was a small bird that had kind of got wet and were flying too close to the cars, right? And it was becoming to be winter, and it was a small baby bird, right? So I thought like, okay, let's take it in. So I drove home with it in my pocket. And when we come home, I had some birds at that time, rescue birds. So I went into their cages and just, eating with them and stuff. That bird is always around. And with that bird has now had own family and own puppies, bird babies. And there is a distance in the way that it doesn't come on my hand, but it's not afraid of me. It just think I'm a big figure, but and it taught the child babies that I'm not unfriendly, and they can always. So I also had like I looked after ducks and seagulls when I was a kid, and that it is probably a sort of biostare. It's called a stare in Denmark. And when I was a child, there was one winter where they came too close to the ice. They were drinking and they got the feathers frozen to the lake, right? So when I was a kid, I was fishing these birds in from the lake, pretty dangerous anyway, but and I dried them up and gave them some bread and so on. It was pretty strange because the whole room where they were, I had like 30 birds inside, and the whole thing was smelling of wet birds, and that was in a private home. I was wondering what if there wasn't anyone home. But anyway, all of these birds, some of them died because they were exhausted or frozen too much, and some of them survived, and they still remember. And they even tell the other baby birds who I am, and they're often around where I am somehow. So if I'm talking welfare, the best thing is actually to give wildlife a chance. Meaning, for example, driving. if you drive your car, that you don't drive so fast you hit somebody. If you're a hunter, maybe feed the animals and maybe, don't kill everything, It's hard to be out there and losing your babies year after years because some hunter want a steak, you know. He can probably make his own steak by having pigs in the garden if or dogs or something. So basically it's about respecting. Um, about rescue, I will say like many of the animals I had has been psychology hurt as much as physical. I have a rabbit that if there's a voice of a child, it hides. The child has never in the half year or before tried to catch it, never. Not that I know of. But the voice is enough. And try to be as terrified for kids that a voice is enough to make you unstable, right? So my two big Belgian rabbits, they're just relaxing and doing nothing, and they're not like, I don't touch them because they don't really like it, and you have to respect that. The same with the dog. Sometimes we touch a little bit, but the black dog thinks that touching is a lot of things, and I found out actually in animal behavior that touching a dog is a complicated language, right? If you touch on behind, it might be approach to something. If you're touching on the head, it might be an assault. The same with horses. You think that clapping a horse or touching a horse is nice for the horse, but no. I found I had a horse that was not ridden much, and it was not like, it was respected for what she was, right? And she taught me that if you're going to talk to a horse, there is a pattern how you touch, and it's going to take time. So first you're sneezing to each other, then you're maybe touching the neck, maybe the forefront, and maybe the stomach, and maybe not, right? So basically it's complicated. And I think people go wrong because they think they can do what they want. They don't need to learn the rabbit language, the dog language, the horse language. They just take it. They just clap it up, and actually it's assaultive. You could imagine if a stranger walk up to you, you're sitting on a bench in the town or on a cafe, and a strange, insane person walks up to you and begin to curl your hair. That would be weird, wouldn't it? So what do you think about dogs? What is it our people go up, lovely dog you have, can I say hello? And if I say, no you can't, because the dog don't like being touched, you will think, what? But that's the truth. They don't necessarily like you being cuddled because they're not the same species. I think it would be weird if a person was cuddling a child they didn't know, So animal welfare is also to know something about biology and behavior, to understand what they want and what they need, right? Because not every rescue animal is fit for rescue. I know the animal welfare in Denmark, the Dyrenes Beskyttelse is pretty good. They test the animals if they're comfortable with a new owner, and if they're not going anywhere then. That meaning dogs that don't really like people, they don't go to people, they get free, So don't misunderstand me, there's a lot of YouTube videos where I think this is not rescue, this is rescue cruelty. Horses that did go to a slaughter, if I as an owner, I don't have a horse now, but if I as an owner trust that horse is going to go away for whatever reason, it's not very nice to know that it didn't. It ending up in some kind of self-proclaimed therapy, all kind of series of experimental treatment. You cannot fix everything. And death is not that scary if you're hurt.